It's a show with a deliberately directionless narrative. The Walking Dead toys with the idea of hope. Characters are relieved at the potential for a safe haven to exist, but what they encounter are more problems that ultimately go unresolved, forcing them to move on under the dwindling assumption that next time will be better. The story becomes a process of trial and error. Each time they encounter a new location or group of people, their actions and instincts improve, albeit in increasingly hostile ways. Unlike most zombie or post-apocalyptic fiction that we love, The Walking Dead has the advantage of longevity. We are watching the transformation process, the devolvement of humanity. In earlier scenarios, the characters would attempt to approach a situation rationally and in the most socially acceptable way possible. For example, when they approach Herschel's farm, they ease their way into the settlement by gaining trust through helpful labour and rapport, but after the Barnhouse massacre, Rick prepares to shoot down strangers rather than build a friendly relationship. When they fail to work as a democracy, leading to the death of the show's optimistic character Dale as well as the downfall of Herschel's farm, Rick resorts to a dictatorship. Do you see the trend that's emerging? The trial and error process of the story becomes a vicious cycle. The group attempt to act civilized, but what results is death, destruction, and deception, leading to more violent or aggressive responses to reflect their frustration, after which they go back to their old ways in an attempt to find a peaceful solution to maintain any fragment of hope left in humanity, but rarely does this happen. In fact, the longer the story goes on, their attempt at peace becomes less and less prevalent. No encounter or problem has ever ended peacefully or rationally. For example, while peacefully trying to exchange for Beth, everything goes calmly and orderly, but in a fit of frustration, Beth violently assaults Dawn, resulting in both their deaths. It's an annoying conclusion for both characters because neither death was necessary, but it goes to show how devolved humans have become. The reason peace becomes less prevalent is because people have realized that peace usually results in death or negative consequences. It points to the significance that Rick has to the story. As a police officer, he is the voice of law and order, so in theory, judgment and justification land squarely in his hands. Rick is in a position where it's literally his job to maintain peace and prosperity. If a police officer was to go against their own code of ethics and honour, then the legal system has completely failed, and in real life that's not uncommon, making us question the people in charge of maintaining order in society. But what's frightening is how constant Rick's responsibility is scrutinised not only by characters, but also by us, just like how we criticise the police and state today. I mean, just look at Making a Murderer, for example. Rick's continuous emotional and mental decline reflects the depleting social order. In other words, whereas before Rick would usually talk things over and attempt to resolve a conflict peacefully like any good police officer would, seeing that everybody's answers are at the barrel of a gun, Rick has submitted to this primitive action as well. It's an easy answer when there is no structure in place for a normal society to operate. Criminologists James Wilson and George Kelling introduced the concept of broken windows theory in 1982, which argued that if a building had a few broken windows that went unfixed, it encourages people to break more windows because a trend has already been established. You can apply the same theory to the world of The Walking Dead. As normal people shoot and kill others, a trend is established. In this case, broken windows is the equivalent to murder. As a result, other people feel it's now a socially acceptable act, which will ultimately increase to the point where it becomes the norm, a functioning aspect of society. If nobody is stopping the violence, then it becomes an acceptable part of the world. In Rick's case, as somebody who polices the law, for him to commit the same act encourages the approval of its existence. Consequently, Rick reinforces the fact that laws and the legal system we once believed in no longer apply. He is supposed to be the acting role model of what we can and cannot do, so the increase in harsher methods of punishment and survival such as martial law begin to manifest in this new world order. If that doesn't make the development of humanity depressing enough for you, let's go back to Rick's speech. At one point Rick declares, "We're not too far gone." It's a very iconic line that is also the title of the episode, which deliberately leaves out the word "not." When Rick finishes his speech, we see this smile on Herschel's face reinvigorating hope. But here's the tragic reality. The governor is actually captivated by Rick's speech and does seem to contemplate his thoughts, but as the camera cuts to a POV, he examines the sharp blade then stares at Rick, a small weak man behind an even weaker fence. He sees hope, only for the illusion to be shattered by the reality, reinforced by seeing it through his eyes. He proceeds to call Rick a liar and swipes the blade at Hershel's neck because he and Rick both know that they are in fact too far gone. The moment the governor kills Hershel is the moment that Rick truly transforms. He open fires, contradicting his own speech, making him out to be a hypocrite of his own words through violent actions, tragically nullifying the meaning behind it, and thus making Hershel's moral preaching worthless. Many would say that Rick's actions are justified as self-defense and an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, but really in fact it's just revenge, a response that usually causes more harm than good if we're talking about reality. Beth's exchange echoes the same theme as the prison shootout. Nobody had to die, but Beth, a very innocent, sweet, humble character, has become morally disillusioned and desensitized by the act of violence, and dies as a result of her attempt at revenge. Violence is now a necessity. It always has been since the start of time. The Walking Dead is a story about survival, but also justifies the existence of violence as commonplace, bringing it back into tradition. In fact, it's not hard to see the parallels to the old Wild West. The reality is that hope is far from the truth. What we as the audience must come to realize is that things can only get worse as the show progresses, as these scenarios have presented, especially in how McCarthy describes it in his novel. The directionless tone of the show helps perpetuate the eventuality that everybody will inevitably and tragically meet their unlawful and cruel demise before humanity stops breathing once and for all.
In episode 3 of season 6, we learn to hate Nicholas, but if you see Nicholas from the perspective that just like Morgan, he suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder, a lot of things begin to make sense, like his overly anxious attitude to take action, how he drifted away mentally at times, and a bit of agoraphobia that he exhibited. If you have an anxiety disorder or know anyone who has PTSD, then you're aware of mental loops that keep repeating over and over again, and this is shown symbolically as Nicholas's character goes through a maze and he can't seem to find a way out. He's doing the same thing over and over again, and through that environment, Glenn's post-apocalyptic cognitive behavioral therapy helps him out of this mental loop. Walker's being the external stimuli Nicholas is actively addressing, and Glenn is being the therapist and directing his recovery.
Hey, you are here now. You are not that guy anymore.
Ultimately, at the end of his psychological and physical maze, Nicholas's PTSD mental loop is stopped in the most dramatic Walking Dead fashion.
Thank you.
Hollywood's portrayal of zombies is nothing more than mockery of the current condition of the world's population. Every day, people are becoming more and more materialistic, selfish, without reasoning skills, and without cognitive capacity. And just like hordes of the undead, we go everywhere there is a spark of life and a sense of soul, and we destroy it, devour it, making it another part of this vast network of non-functioning lifelessness ready to cave at a second's notice to peer pressure, authority figures, mainstream media, popular trends. Most people don't even recognize that this is them. They don't realize that they've been programmed to conform to the status quo, to follow the herd, completely abandon reason, rational thought, and independent thinking. Not only that, but your time on Earth, and essentially your life, is stolen from right under your feet. You go to school to be trained for your future slavehood. Then as an adult, you slave away at your shit job that consumes most of your time while your kids are being raised by the state. So when you get home, you don't even have the energy or drive to do anything of real value. So you get your GMO food ready, you get your fluoridated water, or your high fructose corn syrup sugar drink, and you watch TV. mindlessly downloading the targeted programming that's meant to keep you in a low state of consciousness without even knowing. And you're so tired that you just let your kids do it too. The cycle continues. You keep taking your pharmaceuticals. You keep thoughtlessly consuming products. You keep eating and drinking the poisons that are relentlessly marketed to us on a daily basis. You keep letting the television form your worldview. Why do we keep doing this?